The morning sunlight filtered softly through the sheer linen curtains of the master bedroom, casting warm, amber geometric patterns across the hardwood floor, where Elena, at 38, was methodically completing her daily spinal rehabilitation exercises. A year had passed since the devastating vehicular accident on the Colorado highway that nearly fractured her spine. Yet every deliberate stretch served as a quiet, powerful testament to an unyielding resilience that refused to let physical trauma define her destiny. At 38, she embodied the absolute peak of feminine grace, intellect, and professional mastery, having built a thriving, nationally acclaimed urban design firm through years of visionary leadership, creative brilliance, and tireless dedication. Beside her, kneeling with infinite patience and quiet devotion, was David, her husband of 12 years, whose unwavering love had been the steady anchor keeping her grounded through the darkest nights of physical agony and emotional recovery. He adjusted the resistance band with gentle precision, his eyes radiating an enduring adoration that transcended mere physical healing. Their bond was forged not merely in romance, but in the profound trenches of mutual sacrifice, intellectual alignment, and unspoken trust, proving that true partnership deepens when tested by life's fiercest storms. As she stood upright with steady resolve, feeling the strength returning to her core, Elena felt the rich tapestry of her maturity blossoming into its most brilliant season. She was completely unintimidated by the lingering shadows of yesterday, fully ready to embrace the boundless horizon with the hard-earned wisdom, sovereign confidence, and boundless creative power of a woman who knew her true worth. The tranquil morning atmosphere was abruptly shattered by the sharp chime of the doorbell, signaling the unannounced arrival of Elena's older sister, Victoria, and her ambitious husband, Brandon. Stepping into the elegant entryway with an air of calculated condescension, Victoria offered barely a passing, superficial glance toward Elena's healing back, asking no genuine questions about her arduous physical rehabilitation. Instead, her sharp, predatory eyes darted restlessly across the open-concept living space, assessing the high-end architecture and luxury furnishings like a greedy insurance adjuster evaluating distressed assets. While Brandon awkwardly lingered by the foyer doorway, murmuring rehearsed, insincere pleasantries, Victoria strolled purposefully toward the sunlit corner housing Elena's private workstation. With unmasked nosiness and zero respect for personal boundaries, she began openly rifling through confidential urban design blueprints, corporate governance records, and quarterly financial audit statements neatly arranged across the polished desk. Her fingers lingered covetously over official company seals, banking credentials, and prestigious industry awards, her expression hardening into an unmistakable mask of envy that she poorly attempted to disguise beneath a tight, artificial smile. Victoria had spent decades harboring deep-seated bitterness over Elena's superior talent and self-made success, and seeing her younger sister physically vulnerable following the crash had clearly awakened a toxic, opportunistic greed within her soul. Every invasive gesture, From her dismissive inspection of Elena's professional trophies to her probing inquiries regarding corporate management passwords, exposed their true motives. What was wrapped as an affectionate family check-in was actually an unsettling, calculated intrusion of raw envy, financial desperation, and predatory self-interest disguised as false sisterly devotion. As they seated themselves in the sunlit parlor over cups of tea, Victoria wasted no time unveiling the sinister narrative she and Brandon had meticulously concocted behind closed doors. With a heavy, theatrical sigh laden with fabricated sisterly grief, Victoria began lamenting to David about how tragic it was that Elena's cognitive faculties had allegedly deteriorated following her severe concussion on the highway. She whispered poisonous falsehoods with practiced ease, suggesting that the neurological impact of the accident had left Elena suffering from permanent psychological trauma, severe memory deficits, and profound executive dysfunction. According to Victoria's malicious fabrication, her sister was supposedly no longer mentally competent enough to oversee her multi-million-dollar architectural firm, manage her extensive commercial real estate holdings, or safeguard corporate banking accounts. It was a calculated psychological offensive designed to plant seeds of doubt in David's mind, isolate Elena emotionally, and lay the groundwork among extended family members and corporate board directors for a hostile takeover. By framing Elena as mentally incapacitated and emotionally unstable, Victoria hoped to construct a plausible legal justification for an emergency conservatorship petition, positioning herself as the self-sacrificing, benevolent older sister who would graciously step in to manage the family legacy. Every exaggerated sigh, sorrowful head shake, and patronizing pat on Elena's knee was a deliberate move in an elaborate scheme to usurp financial control while hiding behind a pious mask of familial concern. They assumed Elena's physical trauma made her an easy target, completely underestimating the razor-sharp intellect of a resilient woman whose mental acuity remained entirely intact and formidable. Instead of reacting with fiery indignation or granting her sister the emotional satisfaction of a volatile confrontation, Elena maintained an absolute, regal composure. She leaned back comfortably against the plush sofa cushions, her posture straight and commanding despite her healing spine, fixing Victoria with a serene, penetrating gaze that spoke volumes without uttering a single defensive syllable. Elena understood that when dealing with arrogant, manipulative adversaries, one's most potent weapon is often a deafening, impenetrable silence that forces the deceitful party to overplay their hand out of sheer psychological discomfort. She sat quietly, watching the nervous twitch in Brandon's jaw and listening intently as Victoria stumbled over her own fabricated medical timelines, legal buzzwords, and financial estimates. Every whispered calculation, greedy insinuation, and condescending remark uttered in that living room was quietly cataloged in Elena's razor-sharp memory, transforming their arrogant visit into an invaluable intelligence-gathering operation. She felt no need to interrupt their absurd lies, nor did she dignify their slanderous insults regarding her cognitive capacity with an argument. To Elena, Allowing her sister to foolishly believe her deception was working felt like watching an overconfident chess opponent enthusiastically march their king straight into a hidden, unavoidable checkmate. That profound, heavy stillness, rooted in supreme self-confidence, emotional mastery, and cold, tactical foresight, unnerved Victoria far more than any explosive emotional outburst ever could, casting an icy chill of unease across the sunlit parlor as the true balance of power silently shifted forever between them in that unforgettable moment of quiet, sovereign victory and unshakable personal dignity. When Victoria and Brandon finally departed with smug, triumphant smiles, convinced they had successfully laid the groundwork for their hostile takeover, the heavy front door clicked shut behind them. Elena turned her head slowly toward David, and in that quiet, loaded glance, an entire tactical conversation passed between husband and wife without a single word needing to be spoken aloud. As a senior cybersecurity expert, David immediately walked over to Elena's workstation in the home office, his expression darkening into one of focused determination as he initiated a comprehensive digital forensic audit. Within minutes, his keystrokes uncovered sophisticated diagnostic security logs, revealing that unauthorized remote access protocols had been covertly executed on Elena's encrypted laptop earlier that afternoon, while Victoria pretended to admire her architectural awards. Someone had attempted to copy proprietary corporate files, financial ledgers, and administrative passwords using a hidden flash drive linked directly to Brandon's accounting firm's servers. The full scope of their treasonous conspiracy crystallized with terrifying clarity. Their visit was merely a physical distraction designed to facilitate corporate espionage and digital theft. Rather than panicking or reacting with emotional distress, a calm, knowing smile touched Elena's lips as she met David's fierce, protective gaze. In that moment of complete alignment, their unbreakable partnership transformed into a formidable war council. They agreed instantly to execute a brilliant counter-strategy by playing along with the illusion of weakness while quietly feeding their greedy adversaries honey-trapped data and gathering indisputable forensic evidence that would crush the conspiracy forever before the eyes of the law and justice in this world. Unbeknownst to Elena, while the morning sun still cast long golden shadows across the Colorado Valley, Victoria had already set her sinister legal machinery into immediate motion. Driven by an insatiable hunger for unearned wealth and a lifelong envy of her sister's brilliance, Victoria quietly filed an emergency conservatorship petition with the local district court. The malicious legal document brazenly petitioned the judge to strip Elena of her financial autonomy, corporate voting rights, and personal decision-making authority, under the false pretense that the highway accident had left her suffering from severe cognitive impairment. Victoria painted a deeply distorted, sympathetic picture of a once capable woman who was now allegedly broken, confused, and utterly incapable of managing her own multi-million-dollar urban design firm. It was a calculated, predatory maneuver executed behind closed doors, weaponizing the judicial system against a recovering survivor in an attempt to bypass corporate governance safeguards entirely. By manipulating legal definitions of mental incapacity, Victoria hoped to secure an emergency ex parte order before Elena could even mount a defense, believing that swift, underhanded legal paper warfare would paralyze her sister's architectural empire and force an unmitigated surrender without firing a single open shot in court. She firmly believed that Elena's physical vulnerability would translate into total helplessness, completely oblivious to the fact that her fraudulent petition would soon serve as the primary instrument of her own public exposure, dismantling her deceit while igniting an unbreakable resolve within the resilient woman she foolishly sought to destroy in her relentless pursuit of unearned power and hollow corporate prestige. As court filings triggered internal administrative flags, David initiated a meticulous deep dive audit into Elena's cloud servers, financial repositories, and corporate email accounts. Working late into the night under the soft blue glow of dual monitors, his cybersecurity expertise quickly uncovered a series of alarming digital anomalies embedded within recent administrative records. Detailed technical forensic analysis revealed indisputable proof that Victoria and Brandon had covertly deployed sophisticated digital signature duplication software, illegally forging Elena's electronic signature across several sensitive financial documents, board resolution waivers, and asset restructuring agreements. It was not merely an ambitious corporate overreach. It was a premeditated felony, executed with cold, calculating personal malice, while Elena was fighting for her physical recovery in the hospital. David looked across the workstation at his wife, his jaw tight with righteous anger, as he presented the immutable cryptographic logs showing the exact timestamps, IP addresses, and MAC addresses originating directly from Brandon's accounting firm. Instead of reacting with panic or anger, Elena leaned closer to the screen, her eyes gleaming with a cool, sharp brilliance. She instructed David to preserve every single byte of metadata, establish an immutable digital chain of custody, and mirror the audit trails onto secure offline servers. She understood that in the modern courtroom, forensic digital evidence was the ultimate, unassailable truth. By allowing her greedy sister to believe her forgery had gone unnoticed, Elena was quietly handing Victoria enough rope to hang herself legally, transforming their desperate forgery into an absolute, airtight, irrefutable legal trap that would crush their treacherous corporate conspiracy forever in court. Armed with forensic proof and legal certainty, Elena deliberately executed a brilliant strategy of psychological misdirection, stepping fluidly into the role of a fragile, overwhelmed victim. When Victoria arrived at the house 2 days later, under the pretense of discussing urgent company affairs, Elena met her wearing a soft, oversized sweater, her movements slow and hesitant, her voice quiet and laced with fabricated fatigue. She sat in the armchair with a throw blanket draped over her lap, holding a teacup with slightly trembling hands, while allowing Victoria to steer the conversation toward corporate management. Whenever Victoria brought up board voting shares, executive authority, or bank authorization access, Elena acted visibly confused, pausing mid-sentence as if struggling to comprehend basic administrative terms and softly complaining of headaches. Victoria practically vibrated with triumphant arrogance, her eyes gleaming as she observed what she believed to be indisputable proof of her sister's cognitive decline and emotional breakdown. Believing her hostile takeover was already an assured victory, Victoria adopted an insufferably patronizing tone, offering comforting lies about how she would graciously handle all the heavy burdens so Elena could rest without worry. Elena nodded timidly, maintaining her vulnerable facade with masterclass discipline, allowing Victoria's unchecked ego to expand to dangerous proportions. Beneath that quiet, frail exterior hummed the razor-sharp mind of a master strategist who was observing every detail, analyzing every slip of Victoria's tongue, and allowing her predatory adversary to walk willingly, enthusiastically, and blindly deeper into an inescapable legal abyss from which there would be no possible escape whatsoever in court. While Victoria remained blissfully intoxicated by her own manufactured illusions, Elena and David took swift, decisive action to secure their objective: unassailable medical truth. Early the following morning, they drove discreetly to the premier neuromedical institute in the state capital, bypassing local clinic networks to consult with renowned, independent, board-certified neurologists and neuropsychiatric specialists. Elena underwent a rigorous, multi-hour battery of advanced cognitive assessments, spatial reasoning examinations, memory retention tests, and comprehensive neurological evaluations designed to measure executive functioning with absolute clinical precision. The quantitative results were nothing short of stellar, confirming unequivocally that Elena's cognitive faculties, mental processing speeds, and strategic problem-solving abilities were operating at peak professional levels, completely untainted by any neurological impairment or trauma. The chief of neuropsychology drafted a comprehensive, legally binding medical affidavit certifying her exceptional mental competence and pristine neurological health. Holding that official certification in her hands, Elena felt a profound wave of validation and quiet triumph wash over her spirit. The scientific data was absolute, objective, and entirely immune to emotional manipulation or false testimony. While her sister relied on rumors and forged documents, Elena possessed bulletproof medical evidence, backed by the state's top medical authority. This pristine evaluation was not merely a defense of her sanity. It was a devastating legal shield that would dismantle Victoria's petition in an instant, proving before the court that the only dysfunction present was the toxic greed driving her sister's soul. She was fully ready to reclaim her life, her corporate legacy, and her untarnished name with absolute dignity and unyielding power. Equipped with immutable forensic server logs and an unassailable medical clearance affidavit, Elena and David secured an emergency confidential strategy session with Sarah Jenkins, a formidable senior litigation partner known statewide for her fierce defense of corporate governance and complex estate fraud. Seated in the sunlit corner conference room overlooking downtown Denver, Attorney Jenkins meticulously reviewed the encrypted files, her sharp eyes scanning the digital evidence with professional reverence before a slow, knowing smile crossed her face. They didn't just walk into a trap, Elena. They built the gallows themselves, Sarah remarked dryly, instantly grasping the brilliant tactical position Elena had engineered. Together, they mapped out a devastating courtroom counteroffensive that would not only demolish Victoria's conservatorship petition on day one, but also trigger severe civil liability countersuits and an immediate criminal referral to the state attorney general for document falsification, cyber intrusion, and corporate identity theft. Looking firmly across the polished mahogany conference table into Sarah's eyes, Elena spoke with a quiet, unyielding authority that echoed the core of her character. I am not merely protecting my hard-earned assets from theft, Elena declared, her voice resonating with deep moral clarity. I want Victoria to understand, once and for all, that shared blood is never a license for fraud, manipulation, and deceit. With every argument carefully structured and documented, the legal strategy was finalized, transforming a recovering accident survivor into an unstoppable, sovereign female leader who was fully prepared to walk into court and deliver an unforgettable masterclass in justice, personal dignity, and sovereign self-preservation in this landmark case. Under the guise of a benevolent family reunion to support Elena's recovery, Victoria took it upon herself to commandeer the private dining room of an opulent downtown Denver restaurant, summoning extended relatives and key Sterling stakeholders. As the vintage champagne was poured, Victoria rose from her seat with theatrical solemnity, radiating an aura of manufactured grief that instantly silenced the room. With a voice dripping in patronizing sweetness, she announced to the assembled family that she was courageously stepping forward to assume full administrative control of Elena's architectural firm and personal estate. She framed her hostile takeover as an act of profound sisterly sacrifice, falsely claiming that Elena's cognitive faculties had collapsed under the neurological trauma of the highway crash, rendering her utterly unfit to govern her corporate affairs. Relatives exchanged uneasy, hushed glances. Some nodded with superficial sympathy, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, completely oblivious to the fact that they were witnessing a carefully staged theatrical coup. Victoria basked in the spotlight of unearned applause, her eyes glittering with triumphant greed, as she imagined herself the newly crowned ruler of the Sterling legacy. She was entirely blind to the quiet storm brewing directly across the table, where Elena sat upright, her posture poised and regal. Elena listened to every word of her sister's deceptive performance with a serene, unreadable expression, allowing Victoria's unchecked hubris to reach its absolute zenith before the entire family, well aware that this public display of arrogance would soon serve as the ultimate evidence of her sister's unmasked betrayal. With the stage set and her audience spellbound, Victoria shifted her calculated hostility toward David, seeking to humiliate and isolate Elena's most steadfast emotional anchor before the entire gathering. Brandon chimed in with practiced arrogance, leaning back in his leather chair and sneering openly as he dismissed David's 12 years of devoted marriage, professional accomplishments, and protective care as mere background noise. Victoria declared in a loud, disdainful voice that David was ultimately nothing more than a glorified outsider, an in-law with zero blood ties to the sacred Sterling lineage, who possessed no legal, moral, or financial right to meddle in company affairs. They subjected him to a barrage of condescending microaggressions, mocking his career as a software engineer and crudely insinuating that he had only married Elena to leech off her social status and wealth. The extended family sat in uncomfortable silence, paralyzed by the sheer malice of the public verbal assault. Yet, despite the stinging cruelty aimed directly at his character, David did not flinch or lose his temper. He maintained an impenetrable, stoic calm, his posture relaxed, and his face an unreadable mask of quiet confidence. Beneath the white linen tablecloth, he reached out to gently clasp Elena's hand, his warm, steady grip communicating a silent language of unconditional devotion and tactical solidarity. They were an unbreakable unit, bound by a profound love and mutual trust that Victoria's petty insults could never fracture. Quietly enduring the public humiliation, knowing that the conspirators' hollow victory would be swiftly dismantled in the cold light of truth very soon. As the dinner chatter resumed in hushed, awkward tones, Elena quietly rose from her chair and invited Victoria to join her outside on the private, moonlit terrace overlooking the glittering Denver skyline. Victoria stepped onto the cool balcony with an impatient, triumphant smirk, expecting a tearful surrender or desperate pleading from a defeated younger sister. Instead, Elena turned to face her, with a gaze so serene, profound, and heartbreakingly earnest that it momentarily arrested Victoria's cynical momentum. Standing beneath the crisp autumn stars, Elena looked deep into her sister's eyes and posed one final, solemn test of their shared bloodline. In a soft, steady voice, untouched by anger, Elena asked, "Victoria, if I truly lost everything, including my company, my wealth, and my professional standing, and had to rebuild my entire life from absolute scratch, would you be willing to hold my hand and walk beside me like the loving older sister you used to be when we were children?" It was a moment of transcendent emotional truth, a quiet sanctuary carved out in the night where Elena offered Victoria one last chance to choose sisterly love over toxic greed. She was giving her sister an open path to redemption, a chance to abandon her deceitful conspiracy and honor the sacred bond of family before the unyielding gears of justice were set in motion. In that quiet pause, the entire weight of their shared history hung suspended, awaiting Victoria's choice with profound gravity under the vast night sky overlooking the glowing city lights stretching out far below them. Victoria did not pause for even a fraction of a second to consider the profound emotional weight of Elena's question. Her heart, having long since calcified into an unyielding stone of bitter ambition. Instead of showing a shred of empathy or grasping the outstretched hand of sisterly reconciliation, Victoria let out a cold, mocking laugh that shattered the fragile emotional stillness of the night. She scoffed disdainfully, telling Elena to stop living in romantic childhood fairy tales and grow up, pragmatically urging her younger sister to sign the corporate authority transfer documents immediately, before the municipal court formally stripped her of all remaining dignity. She callously remarked that sentimentality had no place in business, declaring that power belongs solely to those who are ruthless enough to claim it. Victoria added with patronizing cruelty that if Elena truly lost everything, she would be nothing more than a burden, advising her to accept her mental decline and bow out gracefully. In that freezing instant, every lingering spark, the grief of betrayal dissolved, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity that set her spirit completely free. She realized that Victoria was beyond redemption, an emotional predator who viewed family not as a bond of love, but as a quarry to be exploited. The final test had yielded its definitive, heartbreaking answer, releasing Elena from all emotional debt and removing any lingering hesitation from her soul as she stood there in the quiet night air, ready for whatever justice demanded next. Without uttering another word of farewell, Elena turned away from her sister with absolute, majestic poise, stepping back into the warm dining room like a sovereign queen returning to her court. She walked fluidly across the polished floor, her posture straight, commanding, and radiating an unshakable inner power that drew every eye in the room. As she resumed her seat beside David, the ambient chandelier light caught the cold brilliance in her eyes. She looked straight into her husband's steadfast gaze across the table and offered a single, microscopic, deliberate nod, giving the prearranged signal that their tactical defense was fully greenlit. The period of patient observation, emotional testing, and strategic restraint was officially over. The moment for swift, uncompromising justice had arrived. David's eyes flashed with fierce, protective resolve as he discreetly tapped his phone beneath the table, transmitting the encrypted forensic files and digital evidence directly to attorney Sarah Jenkins to initiate their legal counteroffensive. Victoria swaggered back to her seat, wearing the smug grin of a predator convinced of her victory, completely unaware that her arrogance had just sealed her absolute downfall. Elena picked up her crystal water glass, taking a slow, calm sip as a serene smile touched her lips. The final test had failed. The emotional debt was cleared, and the unstoppable machinery of law, truth, and retribution was now set in motion to crush the conspiracy forever and reclaim her sovereign life with unyielding dignity and profound peace in this defining moment of absolute triumph under the watchful eyes of all present. The municipal courtroom was bathed in the cold, unforgiving light of early morning when District Judge Thomas Sterling called the emergency conservatorship hearing to order. Victoria stepped up to the petitioner's podium with an air of practiced, dramatic solemnity, wearing a dark, modest dress carefully selected to project the tragic image of a heartbroken, self-sacrificing sister. Addressing the court in a soft, trembling voice that dripped with theatrical grief, she presented her falsified medical summaries and manipulated corporate balance sheets. She spun a harrowing narrative before the bench, claiming that the highway accident had left Elena with severe, permanent cognitive impairment and emotional instability. Victoria tearfully pleaded with Judge Sterling to issue an immediate, sweeping order freezing all of Elena's corporate and personal bank accounts, while granting Victoria total legal guardianship over her architectural firm to prevent what she called imminent financial catastrophe. Her performance was a masterclass in predatory deception, delivered with well-timed dabs of a tissue to her dry eyes as she cast herself as the sole protective savior of the Sterling family legacy. A few gullible extended family members sitting in the gallery whispered in sympathetic agreement, completely oblivious to the fact that Victoria was standing in a temple of absolute justice, spinning a web of deceit that was about to collapse with catastrophic, irreversible force upon her own arrogant head in this public hall. Just as Judge Sterling reached for his pen to review Victoria's submitted paperwork for preliminary approval, the heavy oak double doors at the rear of the courtroom clicked open with a resonant, commanding sound. An electric hush instantly swept across the packed gallery as Elena walked through the threshold, stepping forward with an upright, majestic posture that radiated absolute sovereignty, vitality, and unshakable inner grace. She wore a sharp, custom-tailored ivory suit, her steps fluid, steady, and entirely unassisted by any cane, brace, or physical support. Her eyes were clear, luminous, and charged with a brilliant intelligence that immediately captivated every observer in the room. Beside her stood David, his presence calm and formidable, exuding the quiet strength of an immovable fortress. As Elena glided smoothly down the central aisle toward the defense table, Brandon turned pale as a sheet, while Victoria froze mid-sentence, her mouth parting in sheer, unadulterated horror at the sight of the sister she had pronounced mentally incapacitated. The radiant, vibrant aura of a sovereign female leader completely shattered their elaborate house of lies in a single breathtaking instant, sending waves of panicked realization crashing through the petitioner's table as the true architect of justice reclaimed her rightful place in the court. Before Victoria could stammer an objection or recover her shattered composure, senior litigation partner Sarah Jenkins rose gracefully to her feet, addressing the court with crisp, authoritative precision. Before Victoria could stammer an objection or recover her shattered composure, senior litigation partner Sarah Jenkins rose gracefully to her feet, addressing the court with crisp, authoritative precision. Without wasting a single moment, Attorney Jenkins formally submitted the independent, board-certified neurological assessment from the state's premier institute, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Elena's cognitive faculties, spatial reasoning, and executive functioning were operating at peak professional excellence. Audible gasps echoed through the gallery as the pristine medical affidavit was displayed across the courtroom's high-definition monitors. Moving swiftly from medical truth to criminal exposure, Sarah then presented the immutable digital forensic audit logs and encrypted metadata compiled by David. High-resolution screens flashed cryptographic proof, digital signatures, and IP traces, revealing how Victoria and Brandon had illegally breached corporate servers and forged Elena's electronic signature on financial transfer agreements. To seal their downfall, a crystal-clear security video was played overhead, showing Victoria covertly tampering with files in Elena's private study during her recent visit. This undeniable mountain of objective medical and forensic evidence completely annihilated Victoria's fraudulent petition, transforming her theater of grief into a glaring, undeniable public exposure of premeditated corporate fraud, cyber intrusion, and criminal conspiracy before the judge. Judge Sterling reviewed the damning forensic evidence and medical clearance affidavit with a grim, stern frown, his face hardening as the full magnitude of Victoria's judicial manipulation became glaringly obvious. Bringing his heavy wooden gavel down with a sharp, resounding thunderclap, the judge delivered an immediate, scorching ruling that dismantled the petitioner's claims point by point. He formally dismissed Victoria's emergency conservatorship petition with prejudice, reprimanding her severely for attempting to weaponize the legal system to execute a fraudulent corporate takeover. Furthermore, Judge Sterling issued an immediate statewide restraining order prohibiting Victoria and Brandon from coming within 500 feet of Elena, her home, her corporate headquarters, or her employees. In a dramatic culmination that left the courtroom breathless, the judge ordered the entire evidentiary record immediately transferred to the state attorney general's office for criminal prosecution regarding felony forgery, corporate identity theft, and attempted adult financial fraud. The gavel's final blow echoed through the courtroom like an absolute mandate of divine justice, declaring that the law had stood firm to protect an innocent survivor while bringing swift, uncompromising retribution upon those who harbored predatory malice against their own flesh and blood. As the bailiffs moved to clear the bench, the crushing weight of public humiliation and impending criminal prosecution descended upon Victoria and Brandon like a suffocating blanket. Shamed, ruined, and visibly trembling, Victoria wrapped her coat tightly around herself, frantically shielding her tear-stained face from the flashing cameras of local investigative journalists waiting outside the courtroom doors. The extended family members who had once nodded along with her deceit turned their backs in cold disgust, refusing to offer a single word of comfort to the disgraced conspirators. Brandon hurried down the marble steps behind his shell-shocked wife, their once arrogant posture utterly broken by the grim reality of frozen assets and impending prison sentences. Elena stepped out onto the courthouse plaza beside David, the crisp mountain air and golden Colorado sunlight bathing her face in pure warmth. She stood tall, breathing deeply, feeling the lingering pain of familial betrayal dissolve into a profound, healing sense of personal peace. She had walked through the dark shadows of physical trauma and sisterly treason, emerging not as a victim, but as an invincible, sovereign woman whose truth, intellect, and unyielding dignity would forever illuminate her path into a brilliant, unburdened future. With the courtroom gavel echoing as a stern reminder of legal accountability, Elena wasted no time initiating the structural dismantling of Victoria and Brandon's artificially inflated financial security. Having sustained their lavish lifestyle through years of quiet familial subsidies, unearned favors, and preferential corporate contracts, the treacherous couple was entirely unprepared for the swift, uncompromising wave of economic retribution. First, Elena formally revoked her personal banking guarantees on the luxury suburban mortgage that she had generously co-signed years earlier to help her sister secure their sprawling estate. Simultaneously, through her architectural firm's executive board, she terminated all active subcontracting agreements, procurement deals, and consulting retainers that had long funneled lucrative capital directly into Brandon's boutique accounting firm. It was not an act of petty vengeance, but a necessary surgical removal of toxic dependencies that had enabled their unchecked entitlement, arrogance, and deceit for over a decade. With a few strokes of her pen and encrypted digital authorizations, Elena severed every single financial lifeline she had ever extended, proving that true independence also means reclaiming the power to withdraw sustenance from those who repay loyalty with predatory betrayal, leaving them to stand on their own two fragile feet against the rising tide. She moved forward with calm, dignified purpose, entirely untainted by malice or regret, recognizing that setting firm financial boundaries was essential for protecting her own sovereign household, preserving her company's financial integrity, and teaching her parasitic relatives that unearned privilege inevitably dissolves when truth, justice, and uncompromising self-respect prevail. The withdrawal of Elena's financial backing triggered an immediate, cataclysmic domino effect across Victoria and Brandon's fragile empire of debt, vanity, and pretense. Deprived of steady corporate cash flow and personal bank guarantees, Brandon's firm faced instant insolvency, unable to meet payroll, cover vendor invoices, or service the overwhelming liabilities mounting by the hour. Within less than a month, commercial creditors forced his business into involuntary bankruptcy, locking the office doors and liquidating firm assets to satisfy unpaid obligations. Simultaneously, mortgage lenders, recognizing the sudden collapse of their primary guarantor, issued an emergency acceleration notice on Victoria's sprawling estate. Unable to refinance or secure emergency bridge loans with their credit scores plummeting and criminal investigations looming, the majestic family home was swiftly foreclosed upon by the bank. By the end of the month, a stark red notice of seizure was posted front and center on the polished mahogany double doors, symbolizing the complete, irreversible disintegration of a lifestyle built entirely on deception, greed, and the ruthless exploitation of a sister's enduring kindness and unyielding professional success. Victoria stood on her manicured lawn in shock, watching moving trucks haul away her leased designer furniture as the cold reality of her financial ruin settled over her like a suffocating fog. She had lost her social standing, her stolen prestige, and her material comfort, discovering too late that a house constructed on a foundation of malice and stolen glory cannot withstand the fierce, cleansing winds of truth when justice finally arrives to reclaim what was lost. Stripped of her social standing, corporate influence, and luxurious residence, Victoria experienced the crushing weight of total desperation as reality came crashing down around her. Late one stormy evening, as relentless sheets of autumn rain lashed against the windows of Elena's mountain estate, a frantic, desperate pounding echoed against the heavy oak front door. Elena opened the door to find Victoria standing on the porch, drenched, shivering, and completely stripped of all her former arrogance, her mascara running down her tear-stained face in dark streaks. Before Elena could utter a single word, Victoria collapsed onto her knees on the wet stone porch, clutching at the hem of Elena's trousers and sobbing hysterically while begging for forgiveness and financial mercy. She babbled broken apologies, desperately attempting to shift the blame entirely onto Brandon's ambitious schemes, while claiming that she had merely been misled by her husband's toxic influence and financial pressure. She cried out that blood was thicker than water, pleading with her younger sister to write a check, save her from homelessness, and drop the pending criminal charges before the state attorney general. It was a pathetic, degrading spectacle of absolute self-pity, showcasing a woman who had lost her moral compass completely and now sought to weaponize tears, false nostalgia, and artificial remorse to evade the inescapable legal and economic consequences of her own voluntary, calculated malice, reckless greed, and treacherous betrayal against her own family. In this heartbreaking moment of reckoning under the pouring rain as the storm raged on around them, Elena looked down at her kneeling sister with a gaze of profound, unshakable serenity, completely untouched by anger, triumph, or malice. She gently but firmly disengaged her hem from Victoria's trembling grip, signaling for her to rise, before speaking in a calm, measured voice that resonated with absolute maturity and crystal clear grace. She stated softly, "I forgive you, Victoria, because holding on to bitterness is a poison that only hurts my own soul. And as your sister, I release you from any personal grudge." She paused, letting the cold autumn rain punctuate her words, before continuing with unyielding firmness. However, as a mature 38-year-old woman and corporate leader, I will never again allow a traitorous predator to jeopardize the safety, peace, and financial stability of my household or my company. It was a masterclass in emotional boundaries and personal sovereignty, drawing a sharp, impenetrable line between personal forgiveness and legal accountability. Elena refused to enable her sister's toxic patterns any longer, understanding that shielding Victoria from the legal consequences of forgery would be an insult to justice. She gently closed the heavy oak door, leaving Victoria on the porch to face the cold night air, having taught her sister the most painful lesson of her life, that while love can offer grace, trust, once shattered by calculated greed, can never be automatically restored through tears. And true dignity requires protecting one's sanctuary from those who seek its destruction. Months later, the legal proceedings reached their definitive conclusion as the state criminal court handed down its final judgment regarding corporate document falsification and identity fraud. Victoria accepted a plea bargain that spared her state prison, receiving extensive community service hours, heavy restitution fines, and a 5-year criminal probation record that permanently ruined her social and professional reputation. Forced to liquidate every remaining luxury asset, heirloom jewelry item, and designer wardrobe piece to satisfy court fees, back taxes, and mounting creditor judgments, she and Brandon packed their meager belongings into a rented truck. They relocated quietly to a cramped, dilapidated 2-bedroom apartment on the decaying industrial outskirts of town, far away from the sparkling Denver skyline and exclusive country clubs they had once frequented. It was the ultimate, unavoidable cost of biting the hand that had fed them for over a decade, an expensive and humbling lesson in karma and absolute justice. Victoria spent her days performing court-mandated community service and working an entry-level retail job, constantly reminded of the comfortable, dignified life she had squandered through unbridled arrogance and predatory envy. Meanwhile, high above the valley, in her sunlit West Hills architectural sanctuary, Elena stood alongside David, breathing in the crisp mountain air of absolute freedom, completely at peace, knowing that dignity, truth, and unyielding self-respect will always triumph over the dark, fleeting shadows of human greed, proving that living with integrity is the ultimate victory. The heavy, dark clouds of betrayal and legal turbulence had finally parted, leaving behind a pristine, sun-drenched atmosphere that enveloped Elena and David's mountain estate in pure, restorative warmth. Laughter once again echoed freely through the airy corridors and sunlit rooms, replacing the tense silence of past months with a vibrant, joyful symphony of domestic peace. Elena's physical rehabilitation reached a triumphant milestone. Her spine was fully healed and strengthened, allowing her to move with an effortless, fluid grace that defied the lingering specter of her past highway accident. Simultaneously, her premier urban design firm surged forward into an unprecedented era of creative and financial prosperity, securing monumental municipal architecture contracts that cemented her legacy as an industry leader. Every drafting table and conference room buzzed with renewed energy, driven by a visionary founder whose resilience had been tested and refined in the crucible of adversity. The estate grounds bloomed with vibrant wildflowers under the golden Colorado sun, serving as a living testament to the timeless truth that no matter how devastating the storm may seem, life always possesses an innate, miraculous capacity to rebuild, flourish, and radiate beauty once again from the very ashes of hardship. Standing by the window, looking out over the flourishing garden and the majestic peaks in the distance, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the gift of health, peace, and renewed purpose that filled every corner of her sanctuary. This vibrant new morning marked the beginning of a joyous era, filled with boundless light and endless possibilities for her life. Standing before her expansive studio window one quiet evening, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the valley below, Elena allowed her thoughts to drift across the profound landscape of her 38th year. She realized with crystalline clarity that true feminine strength and maturity do not stem from living a sheltered life untouched by hardship, or shielded from the cruel winds of betrayal. Instead, genuine power resides in the courageous ability to absorb devastating emotional blows, process the deep pain without losing one's core integrity, and deliberately rise again with an even sharper intellect and softer heart. Her scars were no longer painful reminders of victimization, but rather sacred badges of honor, proving that her spirit was entirely unbreakable. At 38, she had stepped fully into her most authentic, radiant power, shedding the burdensome expectations of toxic familial obligation to embrace a sovereign existence defined entirely by her own uncompromising standards. She understood that wisdom is earned through survival, and that a woman who has conquered her own darkest hours stands invincible against the fleeting, petty manipulations of the world. Healing was not about forgetting what had transpired. It was about transforming suffering into wisdom and betrayal into an unassailable foundation of self-trust. As she looked toward the vast horizon, Elena felt a quiet, profound pride in the resilient woman she had become, knowing that her worth was defined not by external approval or shared bloodlines, but by her own unshakable integrity, inner peace, and sovereign grace in this sacred, beautiful chapter of her life. That evening, Elena turned her loving focus toward David, orchestrating a quiet, intimate dinner on their candlelit terrace to honor the man who had been her steadfast anchor through every single trial. As soft acoustic melodies drifted on the crisp autumn breeze, she poured 2 glasses of vintage wine and looked deeply into his steadfast, adoring eyes. She spoke with profound gratitude, acknowledging how his unwavering patience, quiet devotion, and unshakable belief in her capabilities had kept her soul afloat when the entire world felt as though it were collapsing around them. David smiled gently, covering her hand with his own calloused palm, reminding her that true soulmates do not merely share the joyous seasons of sunshine, but willingly stand together in the freezing trenches of life's fiercest tempests. Their 12 years of marriage had not merely survived the storm. Their union had been tempered into an indestructible bond, forged in loyalty, intellectual partnership, and soul-deep reverence. In David, Elena had found not just a loving husband, but a true strategic ally and emotional sanctuary, whose quiet strength allowed her to shine without fear or hesitation. Their shared silence was heavy with a sacred understanding that transcended words, a celebration of twin souls walking hand in hand into a boundless, peaceful future. Sitting beside him under the starry canopy, listening to the gentle rustle of pine leaves, Elena knew that true love is built on mutual respect and unwavering support, filling her heart with profound peace and lasting warmth in this quiet moment of pure love together. Desiring to transform her personal ordeal into a beacon of hope for others, Elena took decisive action to channel her corporate success into meaningful, systemic philanthropy. She officially established a specialized legal defense foundation funded directly by her firm's annual profits, dedicated to providing pro bono legal representation for vulnerable victims of corporate fraud, elder abuse, and predatory financial exploitation. Additionally, the foundation extended comprehensive rehabilitation grants, medical care subsidies, and psychological counseling programs for women recovering from severe physical trauma and vehicular accidents, ensuring they never had to face their darkest hours alone or helpless. Through this purposeful initiative, Elena turned her painful trial into a powerful shield for the defenseless, lifting up strangers who had been targeted by greedy abusers. Every legal victory won and every survivor restored breathed new meaning into her journey, proving that true leadership is measured not merely by personal wealth accumulated, but by the lives we touch, heal, and empower along our path. Her generosity became a living legacy of grace, channeling light into the darkest corners of human struggle, where hope was desperately needed. By turning her personal healing into a catalyst for societal good, Elena found the ultimate sense of fulfillment, knowing that her hardship had birthed a sanctuary of justice and protection for countless other women facing their own fiercest battles. This noble endeavor enriched her life with deep purpose, demonstrating that when we transform our scars into strength, we create a ripple effect of healing and empowerment that transforms the world around us for generations to come. As the autumn stars climbed higher into the velvet sky, casting a serene radiance across the tranquil valley, Elena took a final, deeply grounding breath of the crisp night air. She reflected upon the timeless truth that intellect, unwavering integrity, and profound self-respect remain the sharpest, most indestructible weapons a human being can possess against malice. When we choose to stand tall in our authentic power, refusing to compromise our core values for the sake of false peace, no amount of dark conspiracy, betrayal, or greed can ever extinguish the radiant light of our true happiness. The journey through trauma and treason had not embittered her. Rather, it had refined her soul into something magnificent, peaceful, and enduring. With David beside her, and a brilliant horizon stretching infinitely before them, Elena smiled into the quiet night, fully awakened to the glorious reality that true healing is a sovereign choice, and absolute grace is the ultimate victory. Her story stood as an eternal testament to the radiant triumph of an unyielding spirit living deeply in truth, love, and unwavering personal peace. No matter how dark the shadows of human envy may grow, a life built on goodness, wisdom, and courage will always prevail, illuminating the darkness and shining brightly as an everlasting beacon of hope, resilience, and sovereign joy for all who dare to walk through the fire and reclaim their light.